Hello and welcome to Atheists Talk. My name is James Zimmerman and I will be your host for this show. This is actually the second part of a two-part show that we're doing where we're talking about some interesting books to read with your young children, particularly those who are maybe in preschool, kindergarten, or the first few years of primary school. To help us along, we have Mindy Rhiger with us. She has a Master's of Library Science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign? Urbana-Champaign. Okay. She writes book reviews for Library Journal and blogs about children's books for mothering.com. And she has worked as a librarian in a public library. She's been an editor for a reference book. And currently she's employed at a library services company where she assists school librarians choose books for their libraries. So a lot of books go past Mindy every day and have gone past her. So she knows her stuff. And in this part of the program, we're going to be talking about good books to read to your young children about science without boring them or going over their head, but keeping it interesting. So let's just start right in. We have 10 books that hopefully we can discuss in the next half hour here or so, so let's see if we can do them all justice. The first one you wanted to mention was On the Day You Were Born. So.
Yeah, this is one of my particular favorites, and it really is a classic. It's by Deborah Fraser, who is a local Minnesota author, and it was published in 1991, so it's certainly a classic by now. It's typically, because it deals with the birth of a child, often given as a baby shower gift, which is really cool. But it isn't just about that. What it does is it has a poetic text that talks about what's happening on Earth when the child is born. And the cut paper collages put the child at the center of all of this. One review I read said, all children believe themselves the center of everything, right. And this book allows them to maintain that while learning about the universe.
Well said, yeah, I like that.
So the story itself kind of has a mythic quality to it about, all the animals were paying attention to you and the gravity was holding you to the earth and it was raining on you and your family and talking about all these natural things that were happening. But it maintains a scientific accuracy. You can read this, myth-like type story, but you don't have to say, like, oh, that's not really how it works, because that's how it works. Right. And then the best part is the fact that at the end, there are, I think, 5 pages of more information about each of the natural phenomenon that are mentioned, from animal migration to precipitation to the different colors of skin and, why we have such variety. So it really is an interesting, unique book.
Did you say that there's a board book version for even younger kids?
Yeah, actually that's what I have for my family. So that was my first introduction, was receiving that as a baby shower gift, which doesn't have the end pages. So I didn't even know about that. I just thought, wow, this is a really neat story that with all this, nature in it. Like, I just think this is fabulous. And then I came across the hardcover and thought, oh wow, this is even better. Yeah. It has, all this extra information. I mean, my daughter's only 3 now, so we don't really get into that as much. But as she gets older, I think that would be a really valuable book to have on hand.
Yeah, it is a great way to introduce them to some basic scientific concepts. I know that when I first read it to my son, he really was curious about what gravity was that was pulling him down, because then he couldn't fly. So he had all these questions about gravity, and it's funny because then from such a young age he was brought up with the idea of gravity, so he would start using it at funny times. Like if he would fall down, I would say, oh no buddy, what happened to you? And you'd say, gravity pulled me down. So it's funny how if you show them even a difficult concept, that if it's broken down for them, that they can start to incorporate it even at a young age. So.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So was Ubiquitous the next one then?
Yeah.
Celebrating Nature's Survivors?
And that is actually another one of my personal favorites. This is Joyce Sidman, also, oddly enough, another local author. I didn't mean to choose that. That's just how it happened. This is Celebrating Nature's Survivors. It's Earth's most resilient species. It's poems and information put together. Each spread, let me find a good one. This one is the beginning, about bacteria. So we have a poem on one side and then a paragraph of information on the other side. And Joyce Sidman actually has several books about nature that follow the same pattern, and she's won awards for practically every book that she's published, including this one. They're just fabulous. The poetry reads really well. It's very descriptive. From a poetic standpoint, it's interesting. It's good to read, which a lot of children's poetry doesn't necessarily tend to be.
Right.
So it's really nice. It's like, wow, this is science poetry that is good.
Yeah.
And then
cool.
for more information, there's the prose on the other side.
Was there a timeline in there too that got a lot of applause?
That's a very good point. One of the difficult things about talking about evolution with kids can be the fact that it's difficult for them to conceptualize, a week, much less millions of years. So in order to help them figure it out, there is a timeline that takes up all of this space. It curly cues around. And so here's the beginning. The first poem is bacteria, which happens here.
Oh, okay, so it's when bacteria first appeared, yeah.
The rest of them, I think the next one is way over here at mollusks. And humans are right there at the end. So it really, do you think all this is time it kind of visualizes? For the kids who are more visual, it's a fabulous way of conceptualizing all that.
I could see a kid wanting to trace that whole thing just for the heck of it one day,
that
like
would
in a
take
car
a while.
ride. Yeah. Okay.
I think one of the interesting things about this is, since I work with schools mostly, is that it's just as at home in a language arts classroom or a celebration of National Poetry Month as it is in a science classroom.
Right, yeah.
Which I like the versatility.
Yeah, that's really saying something about a book if it can be that versatile like that. Yeah, that's cool. And then the third one you had was Riverbank.
Yes.
Which struck me as funny right away because when you first sent me the list, you put by Charles Darwin, and I thought, I didn't know he ever wrote a children's book called Riverbank. But maybe I'll let you explain it.
It actually threw me off a little bit at first. I'm like, is that right?
Yeah.
But it's a little bit like in our last section when I had the book that took the words from the Bible. This is by Charles Darwin in that it takes the last paragraph from On the Origin of the Species and puts it into a children's book form. It's an interesting choice. Because it doesn't dumb the text down at all. It is exactly what he has written, which is not in child-friendly language.
No,
he was not writing a children's book when he wrote those words. And it's also old-fashioned. So it is a little bit interesting of a choice, but it is accompanied with fabulous illustrations, which are big and follow a boy as he explores his environment in a riverbank. It seems like it would be a really interesting way to introduce Darwin, or if you wanted to talk about On the Origin of the Species. Perhaps not the most kid-friendly, but used with a good teacher or a parent who really wants to talk about this with their child would be able to use it, I think.
Yeah, I read it to my son because it was like many of these books sitting around our house the last few days, and I wondered how much he really got because the sentences have difficult words in them, and sometimes the sentences take up like 5-6 pages, so it's hard to follow that thought through all this.
Right.
All of that. So.
There is a glossary at the end that addresses words and even phrases that are scientific, but with young children, that even the glossary isn't necessarily the most helpful. Perhaps I think this would be a most useful book if you were introducing it with a biography of Darwin, and there are several. I didn't bring any to talk about today, but there are several picture book biographies, and even some for like more middle school age kids that are fabulous. That it might be interesting to have them read that and then talk about this book as after they know a little bit more about the significance of it.
Yeah, no, it definitely has its place. I thought it was a cool book. So.
Yeah, it's a really interesting tribute to Darwin.
And speaking of evolution, you had Life on Earth, The Story of Evolution by Steve Jenkins.
Yes, this is a fabulous book. I actually appreciate most of Steve Jenkins' work. He has done a number of books about animals for children, and he has a very distinctive illustration style, using cut and torn paper collages that just get across so much detail in the animals that he chooses to feature. It's absolutely fascinating. This particular book won a number of awards, and Steve Jenkins himself is very passionate about science. There's a quote on his website that I really liked related to science. He says, "My own belief is that the more we understand about what the universe is and how it works, the greater our appreciation of the beauty and wonder of the world, of each other, and of being here to think about it all." Talking about how science doesn't decrease the wonder and our sense of reverence in the world, which some people might assume. You know, but we know that that isn't true, and we want to make sure our kids know that too. And I think that this book and others from Steve Jenkins are a great way to start with that.
One thing that I liked about that book was the bibliography and for further reading at the end, because again, like we mentioned in part one, once you read it, it does leave a lot of questions, which I guess is another good sign of a good book. But then the for further reading shows you where you can go next.
Absolutely. He's definitely simplifying the concept of evolution down quite a bit. I mean, he does a great job with it, but still there are things that could have been covered in much more depth. And if your child was interested, you could move on to other sources.
I read a complaint online where some people felt that midway through the book it suddenly becomes more difficult, and then once I read it, I noticed that. I don't know if you had any comments on that. Or
yeah, I guess I hadn't noticed that myself, but when you pointed it out to me just during the break between the shows, I did notice there did get to be more text towards the end, which, you know, it is an interesting choice.
Yeah, I don't really know if that is anything bad about the book. It just might be maybe if you're reading it to a 3 or 4-year-old, then suddenly you realize it might be over their head or more than you bargained for right before bed, you know, but I still think it's a good book.
Yeah, I think maybe the parent would want to preview it before they deciding whether their child is ready for it.
Okay, the next one was Turn It Loose. The Scientist and Absolutely Everybody.
Yeah, I don't have a copy of this one, and I'm disappointed because I loved it. I originally put it on the list of books I wanted to talk about with you, but I hadn't seen it yet. And it kind of goes lower on my list because I was like, I don't really know that one. And then there were others that I was really excited about. But then when I finally got a copy of it, I'm like, we have to make sure we talk about this one. It is fabulous. It's based on the idea that we're all born scientists. We are all curious about the world, and we learn through trial and error and observation, and we can keep that part of us alive if we try. And she gives all these exercises and interesting things that you can do to
like around the house
to try. Yeah, simple things that you can do for she calls it brain play. And there are also profiles of different people who use scientific thinking, including scientists that you know. I think Marie Curie is one of them, Charles Darwin is another. But also, I think the really interesting part is that she includes profiles of people who are not scientists, who use scientific thinking. She talks about Wayne Gretzky and how he uses observation and prediction and other things when he is playing hockey, and how that's how he is excelled in his field. And I think she also mentioned Dr. Seuss and other people who use some of the traits of a scientist in their non-science life, which I thought was a really interesting way of...
Yeah, that is clever.
Some of the things that she said we all do is observe the world around us, collect data, and make connections, etc. It really opens up science to people who might not feel like they're sciencey, people who like, well, kids who don't get good grades in science. And it's not about memorizing facts, it's about a way of thinking, which I think is really, really great.
It's a good thing to introduce at a really young age, too.
Exactly. And this book is actually for a slightly older audience than some of these other ones. I would say kind of upper elementary and middle school, which was another reason why I wasn't sure if I wanted to include it, but once I saw it, I thought it has to go in. Also of note is that this author has also written a book called Nibbling on Einstein's Brain, which is about telling good science from bad science.
Is that another book for kids?
It's also for the same age group. It's new to me. I haven't read it, but it has gotten fabulous reviews. Very, very acclaimed book that I think is also very important because, you know, obviously telling good science from bad science
is key.
Is a skill that we need.
And does that one tie in nicely with the next book you wanted to mention, Questions by Marcus Pfister?
I have a copy of this book, and I'm glad that I do because it is a very interesting book. Marcus Pfister is an author that you know a lot of parents are going to know because he wrote Rainbow Fish. and many others. This is actually his 50th book, and it's a huge departure for him. It is, well, I think he referred to it himself as a poem about the mysteries of life. The entire book is filled with questions, no answers, and some of them are fanciful.
Oh, there's no answers in this one.
There's no answers. It's just opening up questions. Some of the questions are like this one here is, do apple seeds dream happily of growing up to be a tree? And there's an illustration there depicting that. And some are more scientific. What turns the leaves from green to brown and sends them floating gently down. And some are even more like not faith-based, but like they could be open to faith. Here, who paints the colors on the flowers that lifts their head to the sun and showers? So who kind of implies, like, if you want to take the conversation that direction, you could say, well, God does. But obviously, that's a scientific question that when I first read it with my daughter before previewing it, the question threw me off.
Yeah,
I'm like, who? Like, what? I thought this was a science book. But, you know, certainly it's a book that's designed to open up a conversation. And as the parent, you can direct that conversation however you want. Actually, in my line of working with school libraries, we've discussed this book as kind of inspiring kids to science projects. Oh, okay. Like, here are some questions, like which one would you like to find out how to answer for your science fair project? Yeah,
I suppose if you wanted to squelch any conversation, you could just say God did it for each question.
Right. Be a much more interesting conversation.
Right, So maybe he has a bigger audience then because he allows whatever answer you want.
Right. Also of note are the illustrations. I think the illustrations themselves are a huge departure, not only the text from Marcus Pfister's usual style, but they seem so simple. I mean, they're just bright colors on a white background, but if you look really closely, they are full of interesting textures. They're done with a stamping technique that there's an afterword that talks about how he did it. They're very, the book is worth looking at just to look at the interesting illustrations that seem so simple to begin with, but there's more to them.
Yeah, that's cool. And then you have, which one? Born to be Giants by Lita Judge.
Dinosaurs are a perennial hot topic with kids. I mean, what's not to love about dinosaurs? But the reason that I chose to talk about this one was because it's a great example of speculative thinking, of logical reasoning. Basically what she does is she presents 8 Cretaceous dinosaurs and their family life scenarios.
We have a copy of it.
Oh, good. Here, let me show, because it's kind of interesting. Born to be Giants. And she presents what we know about them and says, well, this is what their family life might have been like. And she's very, very careful to use words like might, possibly, probably.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And invites readers to speculate on what they think based on this evidence. What do you think their family life might have been like? It's a really interesting way to model what a scientist actually does. You know, we find this evidence and then we speculate based on that evidence, and we try not to go too far beyond what we can know, which I think is a fascinating way to introduce that to kids with a subject that's already very popular. The next book, actually, if I can just jump right into it, does a similar thing. Did Dinosaurs Eat Pizza by Lenny Hort. He presents science as still having many mysteries. I think I mentioned before, science isn't just a list of facts. It's a way of thinking. And he says, well, like, it's still pretty open. For example, we know that the Tyrannosaurus Rex ate meat, but we don't know how he got his food. Did he hunt? Did he scavenge? And the illustrations are comical. He says, did he get his food at a restaurant? So there's, not only do we have dinosaurs, but we also have humor in the illustrations. So it's a great, high interest, fun to browse kind of book. But it's also inspiring. So it's like, you know, the kid who reads this book might be the one to gets
to solve
answers.
some of the mysteries. Yeah.
Exactly.
Does he ever discuss the scientific consensus at the moment on if dinosaurs ate pizza or not?
No, that is not actually gotten into. Maybe one of the kids will do some research.
Maybe, yeah. It could be, yeah, like you said, it could be the one reading the book right now.
Yeah.
So the 9th book you wanted to discuss was Our Family Tree by Lisa Westerberg Peters.
Yeah, and this is actually another local author. This book, when it was published, won the Minnesota Book Award, which is for books that were published in Minnesota, for Minnesota authors. It is kind of a mix between On the Day You Were Born and Life on Earth. It has kind of the poetic text set to dramatic paintings that On the Day You Were Born did. But it covers the same ground as Life on Earth, the evolution and adaptations over time. The author is particularly passionate about science and poetry, and how you can bring in non-science type people or kids if you present it in a poetic way. She says poetry can warm up cold analytical scientific concepts and add emotion to the scientific bones.
So is the whole book like in a poetic fashion?
It's not exactly a poem, but it's poetic type text, like On the Day You Were Born.
Sure.
It's not rhyming or anything. It's just feels like a poem.
Yeah. We should have kept track of how many of these are Minnesota authors. It seems like Minnesota must be some fertile ground. 3,
I guess. Well, you know, there's a lot of children's literature right here. There are publishers. We have a very active group of kidlit authors who are based here. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, that's great. And then finally, why? The full title is The Best Ever Question and Answer Book About Nature, Science, and the World Around You by Catherine Ripley.
Yeah, this is a good one, I think, for parents to keep around to win for their kids who are asking all the questions, why this and why that, and you don't always have the answers off the top of your head. You can turn to a book like this. Covers a lot of different whys, like why peaches are fuzzy, why the sky is blue, and on and on. It really makes the idea of asking questions and making connections open and inviting and fun, which I think is important, and which a lot of these books have done too.
It's a little bit larger book than a lot of these.
Yeah, it was originally published separately, I believe, the different sections of the book, and it was they fell out of print and they were revised and bound up into one big book. And I believe there are others that are similar to it.
Yeah, I like how there are some good science questions, like you said, like why is the sky blue, where do puddles go after it rains? But there's also some questions that I think that we as adults don't consider, but that baffle children. Some examples I have are, do supermarket doors open by magic? I don't never stop to explain that to my son, but maybe he's wondered, why do they just open up automatically as we walk towards them? Where does it go when I flush the toilet? So those are books. Those are good questions too, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
One complaint that I read about it was that some people felt that when she had like a section on farm animals, and that she was too rough on the animals, like just assuming that that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't know if you've ever read anything about that at all.
But I could see that being a controversial kind of topic, animal rights and.
Yeah, someone wrote, not only is this highly questionable, but it also perpetuates an implicit acceptance of the cruelty of housing dairy cows under miserable conditions. So as if she's just saying this is just the way the universe is, that this is how cows are housed and how they're milked and stuff.
And again, that may be a difficulty in simplifying the subject for kids.
Yeah.
Can you really get into all that much information about, should cows be treated that way? You have so much space and so many words that you can use, that you have to make choices.
Yeah, not having read the book, I don't know how I would feel on that. I'd have to see if the book is rife with that, or if that was just one odd question that wasn't handled
my impression
exactly.
is that is a case-by-case scenario where that person was particularly, that was their issue that they were strong about. And
that could be, yeah.
But
So my son doesn't ask why, he asks how come. Is this kind of like the book Why?
Yeah, yep, that looks exactly the same. So.
Yeah, it's just filled with questions. Like, he just got this for his birthday a couple weeks ago, so we haven't even really cracked it open yet. But there's a question on every page, and this one is probably more for, like, I don't know, 8-year-olds or so, because it seems like it's easier for a kid who can read themselves to just sit down and read it rather than something that like a parent would read to a kid before bedtime. Is that what Y is like also?
Yeah, definitely. It's a little bit older, probably right around the same level as that. You could take a section at a time if you were reading it with a child, but you know, it definitely for independent readers as well.
Yeah, we've had to introduce the magic of bookmarks because some of the books are a little too lengthy to read in one sitting now.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. Was that every book that we had? Swapped around the order of them. Okay. Well, thank you, Mindy, for discussing them. I'm glad we got all 10 of them done.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for listening. If you would like to contact us at the address that'll be listed on the screen, we'll send you a free copy of our newsletter. If you have topics that you'd like to see discussed in this show or on our radio program or on the newsletter, just please let us know either by contacting us via email or on the phone, because if you're interested in us, we're interested in you. Thank you for watching.